Umesh ji, Nitesh ji, Jimesh Jain, Seetal Sharma, other dignitaries on the dais, respected seniors and dear friends. It's really immense pleasure to be here on the occasion just before Diwali, and we'll be cracking some crackers over here with regard to the issues in place, time and value of supply. And one good thing is that if at all you are not very energized to crack those crackers, as already permission has been granted, you can go for sleep. Okay? And I endorse whatever Nitesh ji said. You can certainly go for sleep. That makes my job easier. Now, of course, the laptop I have attached of my own. I'm not sure whether you will get recording or not. Okay? So I'm sure the camera would not be on that side, so you won't be caught sleeping in that YouTube. Okay. So with peaceful good afternoon. And here there are some issues which we'll like to take up. And the first one, like my favorite, would be works contract. Now normally we have got issues which are like certain issues which were there in the previous laws. They have been resolved in the GST law. And there are some new issues which were not there at all, never there in the past. They have recently come up. And there is a combination of issues that because of this transition from the previous law to the new law, there are certain time being some, I would say, temporary issues. Okay. So we'll deal with those temporary issues, couple of them to begin with, and then we'll go on to the other issues in the GST. Now the first thing which I would like to know, say for example, normally all of us, maybe those who are practicing in the indirect taxes or those who are practicing would be having at least one builder as a client, right? Yeah, minimum one contractor, one builder as the client. Now the first important issue is that if there was certain advances on which service tax was paid. In the previous regime, under the service tax law, one was supposed to pay tax at the stage of advances, right? So there was a stage when you have received advances as a builder and then you have discharged service tax. You have also discharged VAT because of some amendment recently getting amended the entire VAT law on 29th or 30th May 2017, just before the introduction of GST. Now you have paid service tax as well as VAT. However, the actual supply, the work was not completed to the extent you received advance. Okay? As a builder, you received advance to the extent of 80%, whereas the work was completed to the extent of 60%. The question is, balance 20% whenever you are supplying, which is now a supply of service. Works contract is considered to be a service, because there was a dilemma whether works contract is supply of goods, supply of service, and we have got our intelligent Bombay High Court saying it's both. Okay, it's supply of goods also, supply of service also, and therefore both would be applicable, VAT and service tax. Now the question is, if you have already paid service tax, if you have already paid VAT, now to the extent of 20%, the supply which you are making post GST regime, are you liable to pay GST once again? So if you look at this particular section, no tax shall be payable on the goods under this act to the extent tax was leviable under the VAT law. Okay. So if there is some VAT component, goods component which is there in the works contract, and if you already paid VAT on that, there is no need to pay GST. That's what your section 142 subsection 11A says. Now similar is clause B of that. No tax shall be payable on services under this act. This act means GST Act. To the extent tax was leviable on the said services under chapter 5 of the Finance Act, which is the service tax. So if you already paid service tax, no tax would be leviable under the GST law. Pretty clear? So based on this reading, what would be your answer qua that 20%? Will there be any GST liability? वो सोने के लिए बोला है लेकिन थोड़ी देर के बाद आप तो अभी से like the what was there in the food, how was the lunch? Good? Very good? Then it's very bad for the speaker. So, if you already paid taxes under the previous regime, this particular section 142, I mean the clause A and B says that you need not pay tax under this law. Now let's come to section and the clause C. Let's read it out. Where tax was paid on any supply, both under VAT Act and Chapter 5, so VAT as well as service tax, the taxable person shall be entitled to take credit, okay, but the tax shall be leviable under this act. Exactly reverse. In the previous clauses we read that if tax was paid, then there was no tax to be levied under the GST law. Whereas this one says if the tax was paid under VAT or service tax, then you will be once again be required to pay GST, and to the extent you have paid your VAT or service tax, you will claim credit. Now, how do you read these three subclauses together? Will you give weightage to A and B, or would you give more weightage to clause C? Clause C, being a chartered accountant, we are always conservative, okay? And that's why many clients say, sir, इसीलिए हमको डर नहीं है, आप कभी businessman नहीं बनेंगे. So they don't mind sharing their all business, all strategies with you, right? Because they know you are all conservative guys, you will stick to your conservative approach, and therefore they are not worried that you will ever become a businessman, okay? So, of course, our conservative approach says that, okay, if there are two conflicting kind of provisions, and you will say that, see, there it was different clauses for goods, different clause for service, and here it is for both goods as well as services, and therefore one would should prefer this clause C and not clause A or B independently. Now I'll just invite your attention a little minor, or rather I would say finer reading of this clause A and B. No tax shall be payable on goods under this act to the extent tax was leviable. Mind this word, leviable. Again, when we talk about service tax, no tax shall be payable under service tax under this act to the extent tax was leviable under the Finance Act. And what is the word over here? Where tax was paid. Paid means, is it different from leviable? It can be. Though it was not leviable, but if one has paid, then you refer clause C, claim a deduction, but where it was leviable, whether you are paid or not relevant. If that was payable, leviable, then you refer to clause A and C. Okay. Now, what is the department's call? Again, department is as conservative as we are, okay, more on the pro-revenue side. Obviously, they will be holding a view which will result into more revenue. So, if you compare your pre-GST taxes on the construction activities, how much was that? Net effect 5.5%. Okay. What is the net effect post GST regime? 12%, and if affordable housing, 8%. So, even if it is affordable housing, still that difference of 2.5% is there. So, obviously, the government would be more inclined to fit you under clause C, where it is up to you to read and convince that it's the clause A and B which would govern my case and not clause C. Okay. Of course, when I'm saying this, how much is time in your watch, sir? Exact time? 3:55, but whereas in my watch it is 3:40, 3:50, 3:53. Okay. So with every watch, time differs. So with every professional, view also differs. You will say, sir, वो सुबह आए थे, सर वो तो कुछ और बता रहे थे. आप अभी दोपहर को लंच के बाद खाना खा लिया हम लोग ने, तो आप कुछ जगाने के लिए हमको और बता रहे हैं. So it is not so. Of course, each person's the way of reading or way of interpretation may differ. Every person may have little. So if at all the view which I am canvassing, or rather I am suggesting, if that differs from your existing view, we both are correct, right? Because as you have said, your watch shows 353, other gentleman's 350, mine is 349. Okay. So that was the first transitional thing. The second point, which is like again one feels that how will this be in effect? Okay. That is about the section 13 2C, and it says that the time of supply of services will be the earliest of following, and then it says when like the invoice was supposed to be raised, the date of raising invoice, or the final date, the last date of raising that invoice. If the payment has been received, then the payment date, whichever is earlier, and then the date on which the recipient shows the receipt of service in his books of account in a case where the provision of clause A or clause B do not apply. Which could be that case where you have neither raised invoice nor you have received any kind of payment, but still the recipient of your services shows that yes, he has received services from you. First of all, is there any recipient in this world who ever shows, records receipt of services? कभी आपने आपके कोई क्लाइंट में देखा है कि भाई जैसे गुड्स आते हैं तो गुड्स रिसीव्ड नोट होता है, देयर इज अ गुड्स रिसीव्ड रजिस्टर, स्टॉक रजिस्टर. डू यू हैव सर्विस रजिस्टर? हैव यू एवर सीन समबडी रिकॉर्डिंग दैट यस आई हैव रिसीव्ड ऑडिटिंग सर्विसेज टुडे, आई हैव रिसीव्ड टेलीफोन सर्विसेज टुडे, आई हैव रिसीव्ड रेंटल सर्विसेज टुडे? In which case this clause would be applicable. And by default, if you find some Albert Einstein doing that activity, that okay, he mentions that, how as a supplier you would come to know that this scientist has like recorded even your receipt of services? Okay. So without you raising your invoice, without you receiving any payment, if somebody records as if like he has received the services, how would you come to know? So effectively, it seems that 13(2)(c) is meant for only maybe like time pass, okay, a filler kind of provision. Practically, I don't see. And if you find that okay, there is some relevance, please after this session, please come and meet me. I'll be really thankful to you that if you can point out that where this provision can really be of use. The time of supply. Dimming fiction, there is one explanation, one which is provided in the like time of supply of services, okay, which says for the purpose of clause A and B, supply shall be deemed to have been made to the extent it is covered by the invoice or as the case may be the payment. So say for example, if you have supplied some services, or maybe this is also there in the case of goods, that if you have supplied some goods or some services, wherefore you have only received payment as of now, you have not really supplied any kind of goods or services, okay, and it says that if you have supplied, then you, of course you have to raise an invoice. If you have received a payment, you have to just like pay tax on that. The time of supply has already arisen. The question is that it will be deemed that even though you are not supplied to the extent of advance received, it will be still regarded as like you have made the supply, and therefore you will be liable to make the payment of tax. Now, if as a supplier, even my receipt of advance is equated with what? As if like I have supplied those services, correct? Now come to the recipient, whether he will be able to claim credit of this payment. There is one condition, right? What is that condition? He should have received those goods or services, okay. Now if I read this explanation, if it is deemed on my side that I have supplied, can he take the shelter of this explanation one कि boss वो जयेश गोगरी साहब के लिए आपने बोल दिया कि he has supplied just because I have made advance payment? Can I take credit of this because explanation for him it's like supplied, so therefore if he has deemed to be supplied, I have like deemed to have received, okay, and therefore even though there is no actual receipt of goods or service, still because of this kind of explanation I will be claiming credit. Is it possible? And you have got that famous dialogue, right? आपका खून खून और मेरा खून. So when you have to collect taxes, you will say that it's dimmed, supplied, you pay taxes immediately. When it comes to granting credit, you will say नहीं नहीं वो तो dimmed supply के लिए था, dimmed received के लिए नहीं था. Okay, there is no dimming provision for receipt of services, and therefore unless you actually receive, you are not going to get ITC. Okay, so it's quite possible you may not be able to take shelter of this because it is only for dimming supply, it's not for dimming receipt. Okay, and therefore though the supplier would have paid taxes, but you as a recipient, you may not still be able to claim credit in respect of your advances. Of course, if like really there is some case where you want to take little adventurous view, you can certainly take shelter of this explanation one. With the gift voucher, there's a time to get vouchers, na? Gifts, Diwali is coming, okay? And from the time of supply provisions, you get a bundle of, I would say, gift of issues. With this voucher particularly, there are like various issues. It says, when the voucher, first of all, see what is voucher is defined to have some document based on which you can like purchase the goods, based on which you can like get the goods or services, whatever. The question is, if you are buying something from Amazon or whoever like a nearby shop and he issues a gift voucher that next time ma'am, whenever sir, whenever you come to our shop, you will be allowed to buy something worth rupees 500. Okay, so 500 rupees ka gift voucher is there. This provision says that if you know that the supply which will be against this voucher, which can be identified right now, that supplier has to pay tax immediately at the stage of issuance of voucher. However, if that supply which you are going to claim against this voucher, if that cannot be identified as of now, then at which stage will you pay tax? When you redeem this voucher, the supplier will be liable to pay tax. Now take an example that you have visited a garment shop. Okay, you bought garments worth rupees 5,000 rupees. Okay, he gave you a 10% ka voucher, which is like 500 rupees. Okay, and the question is, sorry, not 5,000, 500 rupees, say, presume it is for 5,000 rupees. The voucher, equal amount ka voucher is giving you that next time when you come in the next month, you will be getting this discount worth rupees 5,000 rupees. Now, are you aware that in the garment there are two tax rates? If the goods are less than 1,000 rupees, 5%. More than 5%, more than 1,000, 12%. Now the issue is whether the supply is identifiable against this voucher or not. Garment ka hi dukan hai, he is not selling any biscuits. So officer will say that boss, this is particularly garment shop, he is going to supply you garments only. Okay, to the like supplier, he can ask that you are going to supply only garments because you do not keep anything else than garment. Then how can you say that this supply is not identifiable to the voucher? The second argument could be that I don't know whether that person will buy garments which are like having the MRP or whatever sell price of less than 1,000 rupees or more than 1,000 rupees. So at which rate I should discharge my liability? I do not know. So therefore I will wait till redemption of the voucher. So this kind of dichotomy will come along with the gift voucher. I would say at least with the voucher. Now the another angle, yeah please. That is also possible that he may never come to the shop once again. Okay, he never comes for the redemption of voucher. Then what will happen? Okay. Now another point to this, say for example, can I take a stand that this voucher was given anyways free of cost? What he has paid is for goods worth 5,000 rupees. So I have already charged, I have already paid tax on that. And whatever voucher I am providing is absolutely free. It's gratuitous from my side. So therefore there is no consideration. Therefore there is no supply. Is it? One can take a stand that if there is no consideration, no supply, therefore no GST. So Tata. This is also possible. But there are certain situations where there are vouchers available when one has to pay first, like your Ola wallet or maybe whatever, Amazon wallet, whatever, Amazon money or Ola money, whatever you may call it as. Okay, so you have to pay first, and then like you can redeem it as and when you want it. So in that case, if the things are pretty clear that you can use it only for your cab traveling, motor cab services or something of that sort, if that is so determinable, identifiable, then yes, those persons who are issuing those kind of vouchers, they will have to pay tax upfront. Otherwise, as and when the vouchers get redeemed, only at that point in time, taxes would be payable. Now, of course, with the vouchers, they are as complicated as like your Diwali gifts. Sometimes we wonder, na, kya bheja hai ye? So, these vouchers are like sometimes equally complicated. Say, for example, your loyalty programs. Okay, slowly, like these points, your jet privilege could be the example. Okay, the moment you travel by air flight, like the certain points will be like accounted, given to you. There is no voucher given to you. There is no document. Okay, only you can redeem these points. So the question could be whether those redemption of point will be connected to vouchers and whether somebody would be liable to pay any kind of tax. Jet, anyways, they cannot. I mean, of course, there are like lot many other issues of payment, but the one more issue could be like payment of taxes on this front. Okay, so this is about the gift of issues. Time of supply, there is one more provision which says that if you are unable to determine place of a time of supply, don't worry, you can have go to the residual clause which says whenever was the return supposed to be filed, that will be the time of supply. So normally you are not able to make out when these goods were supplied, when these payments were received, when these services were supplied, when the invoice was raised, you are unable to make out. Then simply ascertain that when are you supposed to file your return. Okay, so isn't it easy? If you can't make out that what is your time of supply, how can you make out that when I am supposed to file return? So this is again a nonsensical provision that if I, first of all, I have never raised invoice, I have not received any kind of payment also, I have not removed any kind of goods, so I don't even know that what is my normal time of supply. In that absence, how can I make out that in which return, I mean, when this return was supposed to be filed for this supply? So effectively, this is one more time pass provision, which really doesn't generate anything. Okay, you can't utilize this. So this is for goods and service both, 12.5, 13.5, for both, this is kind of a similar provision, which is, I mean, very difficult to use it. Yes, sir. So in case of a club, I presume that there could be like various services. Certain could be like sporting kind of activities, certain could be like beverage kind of consumption, which may attract not even GST, which are still subjected to excise and VAT, like liquor for human consumption, etc. There could be certain goods which are like attracting VAT. So in such a case, I would believe that as and when those like points or like cards are being redeemed, at the stage of redemption, one would be liable to pay GST, not before that. We have got one more notification in respect of builders. When there is a redevelopment sort of project, okay, so one has got a plot of land, the other one is builder. Now the holder of the land doesn't know how to build, builder doesn't have plot of land, so both come together, okay, and they prepare a joint agreement whereby the builder says that I'll construct certain area of flats free of cost for you. I will not charge you anything. In lieu of that, you give me your rights of the development for this plot, okay, on for which I am not going to pay you anything, okay. So I'll give you free of cost flats, and the landholder will not charge anything in monetary terms. In such a case, the question is, what will be the point of taxation? And this particular provision, the particular notification throws light that what will be the point of taxation. My first question is that if somebody is giving land development rights, is it first of all taxable at all? The transactions of sale of land, are they subjected to GST? No. You will say, sir, वो sell of land है, ये तो development rights दिए जा रहे हैं. Okay. And then you will say, sir, the definition of service is so wide that anything other than goods is what? So you and me, services. Okay? We are also covered in the definition of service. We are no more human beings as per the GST law. So, if the definition of service is so wide, then how can we take a shelter that the development rights, which is not equated with sale of land, so it is not actual conveyance deed, it is like just a development agreement which is being entered into, only these development rights are being sold, and therefore there should be levy of GST. Now if you see the sale of land, have you come across the definition of land in the GST Act? Is it provided? It is not provided. The definition of land is not provided in the GST Act. So where do you look at? Maybe General Clauses Act, that also doesn't define. It says immovable property. Okay. So then you go to Transfer of Property Act, that also defines immovable property. So you have got some Land Acquisition Act, okay, which defines what is land. Okay. And then like you have to refer to some other provisions like Constitution of India also defines what is land. There is an entry 18 of list 2 in the schedule 7 which says that what is land? Land, that is to say the rights over and above that land. The rights arising out of land. So if what is this development rights then? Rights arising out of land. So therefore land, therefore not taxable. But we have got a notification which says there is a point of taxation. So they have presumed that first of all it is taxable, okay, like many a times we presume, okay. They have also presumed that yes, there is a taxability, and then secondly they have said that okay, if this is the taxability, then, and they have said that yes, this is taxable, and then the point of taxation would be at the stage of conveyance deed or some similar instrument like allotment letter. Now of course allotment letter cannot be equated with the conveyance deed, that's another matter. But they have come out with some point of taxation. Now the question is, if you read the point of taxation provisions, under which section this notification will hold good? In case of a redevelopment project, within how many hours it can be completed? Years, sorry. It takes years. So definitely it's more than 3 months. It cannot be completed within few hours like this lecture, okay. So in that case, if it's going to take more than 3 months, then what is it? Continuous supply, because it's supply of service, right? The development construction activity is defined to be a supply of service. If it is supply of service which is more than for 3 months under a contract, then it is continuous supply. And what is the provision in respect of continuous supply of service? You have to look at the agreement. If agreement says that after 100 years I am going to pay, the point of taxation will get shifted to 100 years. If the agreement says that every stage of 10% completion, if I am going to make you payment, every 10% will trigger tax liability. Okay. Or if it says every month I will be charging so much, every month tax liability will be triggered. Now out of these provisions, which one is matching with this 4 of 2018? 4 of 18 doesn't match with any of the provisions. Okay. So first of all, it presumes there is a taxability. Secondly, even if we presume that okay, let's go ahead with them. Ultimately, the ITC milne wala hai na, like, why to break our head? So let's go ahead with the taxability. Then to the place time of supply is not matching. So which view should be preferred? Should we prefer the section or the notification? And I would say notification. And this is not a conservative view. I am saying notification because that is more beneficial to you. Because at the stage of mere agreement, if you end up paying tax, as sir said, Umesh ji, that project completion takes years to gather. GST आज ही 18% भर के बैठ गए. And then if the project lasts for 10 years, then this 18% amount is stuck. Okay. So therefore this notification is beneficial. That finally you seem कि now OC आ गया, now finally like you are going to hand over, you are signing the conveyance deed. If at that point in time the liability arises, it's good. Why good? Because the landholder will charge you GST and you will charge him GST for the flats which you have provided free of cost. Okay. So both will like do the book entry. He will raise an invoice on you, you will claim credit, you will raise an invoice on him, and like of course that one person will have to pay GST, but otherwise that can avoid blockage of funds. Therefore this notification is beneficial, though I would say little ultra virus. Okay, it's not consonance with the law, but still one can, like, if it is there, we can take benefit of this. DDR, TDR, okay, sorry, okay, transferable development rights. Now again TDR one can like classify into two categories. Now one TDR is when you give your plot of land, say for example like it is for public utility or for some road or for whatever purposes, then you are given a TDR in lieu of that land. The second sort of TDR is that when you do construction activity for government, say for example you want to rehabilitate certain slums, or you want to rehabilitate certain areas, certain houses which are coming on the government project, and then you are like giving them free flats, you are constructing flats for them, then therefore that also you are getting a TDR. So if TDR is generated out of this construction activity, I would say still it's a consideration in terms of kind. But when the TDR is generated out of this land release, relinquishment kind of activity, it is nothing but a right emerging out of land. So again, for that I would equate it with FSI or development rights, and therefore I would say not taxable. If the TDR is sold to somebody else, you have already generated TDR and now you are selling it further to somebody else. For that I would have little narrow view and I would say it's taxable. Having generated TDR and then if you are selling, I would like to equate it with your EXIM scripts, and then like we have got checkered history of the VAT laws, 20th century finance, and there are like lot many other exports cases where they were held that they are intangible goods and therefore liable to tax. That's there. So at the stage of generation, it is land right arising out of land. But once it is becoming a sellable commodity, because TDR can be loaded on any building towards north. Okay. FSI is again linked to the land, but TDR is not linked to any land. It can be loaded on any building towards north of your site within the same ward. So therefore, I would say the TDR is little on a different footing. Okay, so can I request that like can we hold on these questions till I finish my presentation, and then we can take up I think all questions, okay? Because I have got my own questions where I want to confuse you. So once like I have done my job, you can confuse me. Invoice raised before the removal of goods. Now the provision section 31 says you can raise invoice before or at the time of removal of goods, any time. Okay. However, there is section 122 which deals with offenses and penalties. Okay. And typically in India, I tell this in a lighter vein, that world over people buy and sell goods and we buy and sell invoices, right, in India. And that too, this activity happens more in the month of March or September, etc., etc. Arey profit बढ़ रहा है, whatever. अभी तो हर महीने हो गया. So the offenses and penalties provision says that if you supply invoice without supply of goods, it's a offense, punishable offense, and one will have to pay penalty, which is equivalent to tax amount. Section 31 officially says that you can raise an invoice before removal of goods. Okay. Now, how much time before? 3 साल के बाद I am going to sell some goods. Can I raise invoice today? It doesn't prescribe any time limit. Okay. So, there is a dichotomy in the provisions of the law. Of course, the intention is to curb the evasion, to curb this kind of malpractices. But in a way, then like because of the some poor drafting or the lack of comprehensive thinking, I would say, this kind of anomalies are there. Let me discuss. AMC, annual maintenance contract. At what point in time should you pay tax? At the stage of signing up the AMC? At the time of making the payment? At the time of actual, because I am talking about comprehensive AMC. So where if some certain parts are like not functioning very well, even that AMC supplier would like come and replace the parts. In such a case, is it supply of goods or supply of service? Supply of service? Yes. Yeah. Sometimes it may happen that the element of goods is much more than the element of service. Like say for example, आपका motherboard उड़ गया for this laptop. The motherboard itself will cost almost like the whole value of probably AMC many a times. Okay. And sometimes like your monitor is not working, keyboard is not functioning, etc. And if he replaces, then sometimes the cost could be more than even the charge. That's quite possible. So it's very difficult to say that which is dominant in nature. So from what perspective this dominant character has to be seen, which is the principal supply. Okay. Because if it is the composite supply, what you need to see is principal supply, that which is more dominant in nature. So in this case, what are you supposed to see? The value or intentions? Basically, I would say intentions, because at the stage of signing up, you may never know what's going to be value. There could be a case where there is no replacement of part at all. It could be a pure service, pure assurance, mere assurance. And in many cases, it could be resulting out of like more than the contract value, the parts are coming. And therefore, to determine the rate of the classification of that composite supply, I would say principal supply should be seen from the perspective of intentions, not the values. Okay. Time of supply. Say for example, you must be aware that marble, I'm just giving an example, marble, granite, etc. Since like many of you are from Bhayandar area, that's why, and there are like many marble sellers on this side, and many those who are hailing from Rajasthan, Makarana, etc., they may be probably aware that what was the rate of GST on marbles earlier when the law came into effect? 28%. And what is the rate as of now? 18. It has been reduced to 18%. So there was a temple being built, and somebody asked, sir, iska kuch rasta nahi nikal sakta hai? It 28% ka marble, because normally temples require more marble, right? So the question was that the worth of crores of rupees we are going to consume marble. So can there be a way out? And what could be the way out? That you ask that marble wala guy to affix that marble, so that it becomes a works contract. And what was the rate of works contract? 18%. So if you ask somebody to supply marble, 28%. If you ask somebody to supply as well as install, 18%. Okay. So that was the way out maybe prior to this amendment in the rates. Now the rates itself of 28% has come down to 18%. So no more that kind of planning. The question is this thing coming under the purview of anti-profiteering? So the bigger question about anti-profiteering is that it is applicable on what? To whom? when, how to calculate, and till what time it's going to be there in the statute book. Whether anti-profiting will remain for next decade or it's going to get over in a period of 2 years. So again, this could be a very big topic. Since I have authored a booklet on this, so I probably proclaim to know little more than what you know. But many times like it can happen the other way around also. So in case of anti-profiting, mark the provisions in the section 171. It says the reduction in rate of tax or the benefits of ITC will be passed on. It doesn't say reduction in rate of tax as compared to the existing tax laws versus this law. Okay, it doesn't say the additional ITC as compared to the previous tax laws versus this law. It simply says reduction in rate of tax or additional ITC benefit which is accruing under the GST law that you should pass on. So it could be applicable to not, probably not to even, not to transitional scenarios, it's more applicable to GST scenario. So anti-profiting provision does not have any sunset clause. Though the authority is valid for 2 years, okay, but then it is like again provided that the council can like continue it further. But the section 171 does not have any sunset clause. So wherever there is rate of reduction of tax, or if you are getting more credits even within the GST regime, you have to be aware of these anti-profiting provisions and you have to take care of that. Okay. Otherwise, if you feel that abhi 2 saal to bit gaya, abhi kya hone wala hai, who is going to come and ask about anti-profiting authority, anti-profiting aspect, etc. Anybody need not be a buyer, huh? Even like a competitor, even a government officer who has got nothing to do with your products, any damn person on this earth can go and file a complaint. So that brings to me for the issues related to valuation, and there is a simple bisection of this valuation provisions. One is dealing with the act, the other one is rules. Okay. And some provisions we derive from the law itself, and then there is some provisions which are coming from the rules. So we have to keep in mind both this set of provisions. I have chosen some of the, like, okay, this is a broad bifurcation of this entire provision. That valuation could be in relation to related party, then you have got rule 28, or you may have unrelated party. Okay. Then for unrelated party also, if price is the sole consideration, then you need not bother much. If price is not the sole consideration, then you need to look at rule 27. Okay. Even if the price is the sole consideration, party is not related anyways, still there are certain supplies where the government is given specific valuation. And on those valuation again, at certain places they have given you option that you can choose this value or you can have the transaction value. And in some cases, even though price is the sole consideration, even though party is not related to you, government has prescribed that this is the value. Forget about your transaction value. You have to pay tax on this value. Like typically in your import palm oil, there is a fixed price. Irrespective of what price you are buying from Malaysia, they will affix a particular price at which you need to pay import duties. Something similar over here. Like what it used to happen with the cigarettes. Depending upon the length, straight away you pay tax. So what is related party first of all? Okay, that is very important, that who all are considered to be related party. And for that, like there are some provisions where like I would like to draw your attention. The one provision is that such persons are officers or directors of one another's business. Such persons are officers or directors of others' business. Now take an example of Mr. A, he is a director of Apple Limited, and Mr. B, who is like a director of BlackBerry, Berry Limited. Okay. Now the question is whether A and B are related to each other or not. No? Yes? Correct. They are like director in both the companies. Therefore, read the headline first. Such persons are directors in one another's business. So, being a director of A, does it mean that I am owning A's business? Is Apple Limited, being a director of Apple Limited, is it my own business? I would say my business is of being a director, to hold a directorship. Okay. It's Apple Limited who is a separate legal entity. It's his business, Apple Limited. Okay. So typically an individual can never be a director of any other's business, or he cannot make somebody else his director of his business. A director cannot have a sub-director for him, right? Director can have a co-director. So the business can be owned by companies, not by directors. So particularly this clause, in my view, it can never come into effect. Individuals cannot be a director of any other's business. Okay, they can be of somebody, some company, some business, but it cannot happen that two directors will be like holding cross directorship in one another's business. Unless I say that Apple Limited is A's business and Berry Limited is B's business, then yes, but typically it doesn't happen. They are both legal entities, and therefore this particular clause effectively, in my opinion, is effectless. Persons are legally recognized partners in business. They are like recognized partners of each other's business. And then you might have seen various events where you have got media partner, costume partner, whatever, that all nonsensical, like lot of partners are there, na? And see this, there's some night which is there, 16th December, only for 2-3 hours, and see the partners which are there. Like one is some media partner, one is the costume partner, event partner, official partner, and unofficial. We don't know, like they write official media partner, and the other one would be like media partner. So God knows what's the distinction between these two. But this is like, are they partners and therefore the related parties? Answer is, are they legally recognized partner of the business? They are not legally recognized. They are like called, like you could be a knowledge partner for your client. You may not hold a 0%. So, similar sort of partnership. It's not really a partnership, it's only titled as a partner. Like many companies, without including somebody in that Form 32, they will make him a director, associate director, executive director, and whatnot. Okay, only title. There is no information given to the company's law, MCA, that this person is appointed as a director. A mere title of director has been given. Like in film, it happens. Okay, he may not be a real director in that Yasraj production, but yes, he could be for DDLJ. One movie, one can be a director. Okay. Oh, DDLJ Yasraj का है कि नहीं पता नहीं है. I am just citing an example. है? Pardon? Big Four. हाँ, so they have that directors का designation, but really in essence they are not really directors. Such persons are employer and employee. So you have got one Mr. Mistry who joined Tata for some time, then he retired, then he joined Bata, then also he retired, and then he also introduced this Tata and Bata to each other. Now, if the transactions are happening between Tata and Bata, whether is there any related party? And if he buys something, and now he has started his own, maybe say, SPN company. Okay. So, whether this, he would be like having a relationship, can he be called as a related party to T and B? Answer is that employer and employee at what point in time? At the time of transaction or any time in life, if you were like employer and employee, you are like a related party. So I would presume that only when doing the transaction, if one is employee of one employer, then only this both would be considered to be related party, not for the lifetime. And if he introduces to both, anyways, they are also not related party, just because he was a common employee to both, okay, in the past. But yes, as a current, he is holding two part-time kind of employer-employee relationship. Then at least with him, both the companies would be related parties, not those companies per se related to each other. Then the holding of stock directly, indirectly. So there could be various scenarios where like one is holding the complete ownership subsidiary of one company, and then the subsidiary holds further in another subsidiaries, and therefore there could be a scenario where this S1 in this example is not only related to R1, it is also related to R2, it is also related to A, and even this R1 in turn is related to R2 and A. So all persons per se, they are related to each other. One of them directly or indirectly controls the other. So this is like little simpler to understand as compared to the previous examples. Let's say for example, Akshay holds 60% in Kumar Limited, and he also holds 60% in Khanna Limited. So in that case, like Akshay and Khanna Limited, both are considered to be related. At the same time, this Khanna and Kumar also considered to be related to each other, because the common person holds the voting stock, which is more than 25% in each other's business. They are members of the same family. Now in this example, what do you feel? Whether this one is Anand Ambani, another one is Anil Ambani, whether the all three are part of family. So we may say that yes, because they are all Ambanis, okay, part of the same Dhirubhai Ambani family group, okay. But we have got a definition of family. The parents, so the first is the spouse and children. And then it says the parents, grandparents, brothers and sisters of the person, if they are wholly or mainly dependent on the said person. So unless the brother is wholly dependent on the other brother, it cannot form part of the family, and they cannot be said to be related parties. Now it's a different matter whether these brothers are really dependent on each other or not. Related to the person with whom you are doing the transaction. No, all these parents, grandparents, brothers and sisters, all if they are mainly dependent. Okay, it's applicable to all, not only sisters. A sole agent or distributor, etc., would be considered to be like a related party altogether. So what will be the scenario of these related party transactions? Is there any trouble? And will they be examined separately? Because we had the checkered history of excise law, okay, wherein if they are like related parties, the related party to whom you are selling, when he sells further to unrelated party, that price would be considered for the purpose of levy of excise duty. Can there be a similar provision in the GST law? Answer is yes and no, both. Why? Because if the recipient person, if he is going to, if he is able to claim full credit in respect of your supply, then there is one particular explanation which says that you put any value and your invoice value will be considered to be open market value and it will be accepted. But there could be a scenario where the recipient may not be able to claim credit. I'll give you an example which is a Karnataka advance ruling. Columbus Asia, this Karnataka Hospitals Limited. Now they were having hospitals in different states, okay, and they were supplying certain services, like some doctors would be going here and there, some will be common managing directors, common legal CFOs, etc., etc. There will be some common services which are provided by the head office to the branches. The question was, and whether hospitals are liable to pay GST? No, correct? Hospitals are not liable to pay GST. The question is, when one employee of one branch renders services to another branch, is it supply of service? Is it branch transfer? So to your clients, have you advised that they should pay GST? Yes, good. So the branch transfer is also applicable to services. The question is whether the employees of one head office are they employees of the branch or not, first of all. So we have got one schedule 3 which says supply of services from employee to employer will neither be regarded as supply of goods nor supply of services. Okay. The question is, the employee of one branch, can he be considered to be employee of the another branch or not? So if you see from the legal perspective, it's the same entity. Ultimately, this employee of the whole entity as a whole, and therefore schedule 3 will take care, therefore no GST. The other view could be, like section 25 says that they are distinct persons. So if one is registered under the profession tax laws, under the ESIC law, labor laws in one state, so only he is the employee of that state, and he is not an employee of the branch in another state, and therefore the Karnataka Advanced Ruling took this view, that even this kind of employee service also would be subjected to tax. The question was, on what value one should charge GST? Employee cost, or there should be some additional infrastructure cost? What should be the cost? So again, if the recipient branch was able to claim credit, there is one particular provision which says that like you can put any value, but whether hospital, will they be able to claim credit? Since they are not able to claim credit, even the valuation is going to be very, very tricky in this case. Then there is one more provision that like it should be like equal kind, quality, reputation, etc., etc. So say for example, if one has to compare water, now water itself can have 3 different qualities at least. One is tap water, which could be like available at 10 paisa a liter. There is Bisleri. Is it mineral water? It is not mineral water. It is packaged drinking water. Then what is mineral water? Himalayas is a mineral water because they actually tap it from the brook. Okay, that's the kind of difference. And if you go, this is like even costlier than milk. I don't know, around 70 rupees or 80 rupees a liter. Okay, and this could be like available at 5 rupees a small bottle, chotu. And then tap water, probably like with 70 rupees, you can have the whole month ka tap water. Okay. So what could be comparable if the price parties are related to each other, and if there is no ITC available, then you have to see that what is the market price of the same product, which is in all respect, they are like comparable. Okay. You cannot compare your kya 5 rupees wala, whatever, that ball pen and the cross, or maybe even the Mont Blanc. Could be different categories altogether, right? So one more, okay. So one more will take example in like this non-related parties in case of valuation of specified services. So there are certain specified services where like they have got specific rule. Say for example, your currency conversion, air travel agency, life insurance, etc. They have provided a particular provision that this value you can adopt, but that is provided as an option. Whereas there is 2 cases, lotteries and betting gambling, you cannot have your own price. You have to go by a particular price which has been given by the government. So one has to bear those kind of issues in mind. Again, with gift voucher, as I said, there could be issues with valuation. At the stage of like issuance, how can you determine what is going to be your value? And therefore, there could be issues with regard to discharge of the liability. Then you have got some people where because they default in payments, so therefore the bank will levy additional interest, penal interest. Okay. So now, whether the interest which bank is charging, is it subjected to GST? No. Interest is exempt. But if interest is for delayed payment, if there is some late fee or penalty, then it is liable to GST? Yes. So there could be a case where somebody has defaulted. So interest was say 100 crores and the penal interest was 200 crores. So then on what value one should pay GST? On 100 crores, 200 crores, 300 crores or 0? बोलो साहब आने तो दो पहले, प्रिंसिपल का ही प्रॉब्लम है अभी तो. So mind well, it is the valuation mechanism which says that the additional fee or late fee or whatever that delayed payment, the interest for delayed payment will be added to the valuation. When the value of your original service itself is 0, liable to 0 tax, then whatever value you may add, you can make it 1000 crores. Ultimately it will remain exempt, 0. Okay. So even if it is additional interest, if the main service itself is 0 rated or liable to nil rate, then the further value will not make any difference. And anyways, this is, if this is taxable, then government also knows that when there will be a delayed payment, there will be some problem. Okay. So when the basic amount itself is not coming, then forget about the question of interest. So they have provided that this time of supply for this kind of cases would be what? As and when you actually receive. So you might have raised a demand of 1000 crores on somebody for delayed payment, etc., etc. But unless he pays you 10 rupees, it's not liable to tax. Okay. And only when you are going to actually receive that amount, the tax would be payable. A rate of exchange, it's, say for example, if you are importing certain goods or if you are exporting certain goods or services, the valuation, the currency conversion rate are both different in both the cases. For goods it's different, for services it's different. For services you can follow your generally accounted accounting practices, like you can follow your RBI rate. For goods you have to follow customs rate. Every fortnight they come out with their own exchange rates. So you have to follow those rates. So now that brings us to the place of supply. Okay. So we have to finish within by time. Okay, so that we can, like, at least after this crackers, if at all some energy is left, you can actually, yeah. Factory cell. So this is like, there are like various issues I would say in the place of supply, but this is a typical issue which normally keeps on cropping up in most of the transactions. So let's read this out. Where the supply involves movement of goods, whether by the supplier or the recipient, whomsoever, or by any other person, the place of such supply of such goods shall be the location of the goods at the time at which the movement of goods terminates for delivery to the recipient. Now the question is, what do we mean by this terminates for delivery to the recipient? So is it when, like, we are handing it over to somebody for delivering it to the recipient, or when we deliver it to the recipient? So there could be a case when, like, say for example from Bhayandar you want to sell certain goods to Mira Road. Let's presume, and let's say presume that Mira Road is a different jurisdiction. So you are handing over to the Tempo, say today, and he is handing over to that Mira Road based person tomorrow. The question is, finally, like, when it will be said that it has terminated for the delivery to the recipient? Is it when you hand it over to the Tempo wala today, or when the Tempo wala has actually delivered it to the Mira Road based person? Pardon? The movement of goods terminates for delivery. Okay. So finally one can take a stand that the my movement of delivery has ended at the binder itself, and then further it is the Tempo wala who will take delivery and give it to the Mira Road based person. Or one can say that finally, unless I deliver it to the Mira Road based person, I cannot say that it is termination, it is completed. Okay. So both the views may be correct. Yeah, so the Incoterms could be relevant item that at what point in time who is liable to pay freight. Whether the tempo wala has been engaged by the mirror based person or he has been engaged by you. And who is really responsible, the risk and reward. Is it passed on once you have delivered to the tempo wala guy or when he further delivers to the actual recipient? That will determine that what is your actual place of supply. Goods in India. So there like it says where the goods are delivered to the supplier or recipient at the direction of a third person. Then that third person would be considered to be the recipient. Now the question could be like that third person also says that principal place of business of such person. So say for example, if one is having multiple branches in different states and he says that you please deliver to my buyer at so and so state. So say for example Reliance, who is holding registration in all states, all union territories, they are asking you that you please deliver these goods to a Maharashtra based buyer. Now for you, what will be the place of supply? Whether you will consider, say for example, that instruction has come from Maharashtra state of the Reliance, Maharashtra branch, then would you consider, then, and you are also in Maharashtra, will you consider that as intrastate transaction? Because the words are principal place of business. Now what can be considered to be principal place of business? Whether it has to be considered qua each state or qua the country. So all these questions are, I would say, the answers are not available as of now. Okay. Because the way they are saying principal place of business will mean even where you are holding your books of accounts. And you know nowadays, where are your books of accounts? Nowhere. Yeah, nowhere. Probably somewhere in some another country on your cloud. Okay. So there are no books of accounts at any particular place. Then where you are holding, storing goods, obviously like goods will include even capital goods. So wherever, at every place you will be holding goods. So which will be that place of business? And the final one says that what has been stated in the registration certificate. Okay. But now with every state, I have got different registration certificate. With every state, I'll be giving different place of business. So all these questions are going to come up. So then you have to finally determine that who is the final PO making authority, from where the actual PO has come. If it is from Bombay, you may consider that it is place of supply to be Bombay, place of principal place to be Bombay. But it's very problematic kind of a scenario. If you ask somebody, or like if you are into installation of some solar plants or some power plants, then obviously it will include supply also and installation also. The question is which place of supply provision will determine. So one rule says that if you are like involved in supply of goods which involves movement, then you go by the movement where it terminates for the delivery. If your activity involves some installation, then you see in which state you are doing the installation. The question is, in this case, are you supplying goods or doing installation? Whether your goods will involve movement, answer is yes. Whether your goods will require installation, answer is yes. So then, which rule would be considered to be more specific and will be more governing in this case? Or third case, is it supply of goods or supply of services? Because when you construct something which results into immovable property, which involves service and goods both, then what is it? A works contract. And what is a works contract? Service. So therefore, it is also important to ascertain in such cases whether you are actually supplying goods or supply of service. And then accordingly you can determine that which is the appropriate place of provision, place of supply. Okay. In this case, I can tell you that it is a service, it's a works contract service, and therefore you will have to go and look the service based place of supply, not the goods wala place of supply. Okay. And that is connected to like your place of registration and the recipient's place of registration. What will be the place of importer? So in case of import, it says if the goods are imported into India, it shall be the location of the importer. Now say for example, importer has got place of presence everywhere in every state. Then which will be the place of importer? Again, then you have to ascertain that where the goods are going to get used finally. You may consider probably that place, but I would say this answer is not backed by any provision. It's, I would say, general logical answer. So again, in these cases, like answer is something missing. There are certain services where, like, again there could be an issue. Say for example, there are property based services. So one can understand that if it is like architectural services, construction services, one can easily connect it to the immovable property. Now we have got one photographer over here. You have got an event which is being sought. Do you think that under which category will this service fall under? Is it immovable property based service, performance based service, or recipient based service? Performance based. So let's look at this. By way of accommodation in any immovable property, for organizing any marriage or reception or matter related thereto, official, social, cultural, religious or business function, including services provided in relation to such function. Consider this as a business function, okay? Or maybe even social function, Diwali hai, okay? Consider that as social function. Now the services are rendered with regard to this event. Okay, and the last clause says any services ancillary to the services to clause A, B, C, etc. So which includes this also. So this photo shooting, isn't it ancillary to the event service function? And that function is immovable property based service. So even though the photographer would have come from Gujarat, what is the place of supply? Maharashtra. Okay, and if all of us travel together at Goa, and then if somebody from Gujarat comes for photo shooting, what will be the place of supply? Goa. So the immovable property services definition, sometimes like the gamut is so wide that we can't even imagine that this sort of people will be like covered by the immovable property. Normally we will feel that performance based, it's more to do with photography. How can it have some connection with the immovable property? But there is some dichotomy. Of course, it can also fit into the performance base, but I would say even the gamut of property based service also is quite wide. Confused adequately? So I'm just trying to ascertain whether I'm achieving my mission or not. If not confused adequately, supplies in territorial waters. Pakka? At least I hope that रात को आप सो पाएंगे. It starts with notwithstanding anything contained in this act. Burjapura Act, you read only 9. Where the location of the supplier is in territorial waters, location of such supply, or where the place of supply is in the territorial waters, the place of supply shall be, for the purpose of this act, be deemed to be in the coastal state or union territory where the nearest point of appropriate baseline is located. So if the place of supply is in territorial waters, okay, so say for example certain goods are coming from China, you are finding a buyer, okay, to buy it on high seas basis, but the goods are already entered into the territorial zone, which is your 20 nautical miles or whatever, 12 nautical miles, sorry. So once you have entered into that zone, normally hitherto we were taking a stand that this is nothing but an in the course of import, okay, and therefore it is like interstate sell. Now this provision says that the one which is closer to your baseline, so that will be the state where place of supply is happening, and therefore in this case, if you are located in that state itself, say for example you are located in Maharashtra, and when the goods are already entered into this Maharashtra territorial waters, if you sell it to somebody else, as per this provision, it may be possible to conclude that, okay, this is nothing but an intrastate transaction. Even though in your all previous understanding this was considered to be a high seas sales. Of course, I would say this is not a correct kind of placement of this provision with this non-obstinate clause, etc., etc. There are certain flaws connected to that, And recently they have come out with a amendment in the act. Those amendments which are like yet to get notified, because they are waiting for all the states to notify first, and then the CGST Act would be, and the IGST Act would be like, of course, sorry, this IGST Act is not getting amended yet. Only the CGST portion is being amended. But there is one circular which probably clarifies this situation, that finally at the stage when you clear it from the final, the customer, the importer who clears it, at that stage only one would be liable to pay tax. And with certain, there are some finer interpretation based on which one can say section 9 is normally not applicable in case of import of services. It is applicable only when the goods are explored out of the territorial waters like oil, gas, etc. Or the goods are going from the Indian state to that territorial water. Only in this situation section 9 would be applicable. Otherwise, for all import and export transactions, normally this wouldn't be applicable. Typically it happens more with the interstate. There are some other issues. Location of supplier of goods. Are you aware that under which section it has been defined? Location of supplier of goods. It is not defined at all. Okay. Location of service provider they have mentioned, but location of goods supplier, it is not defined in the whole act. Probably they presume that ultimately you know that where from the goods are moving, etc., etc. But still, in the absence of this definition, there could be certain scenarios where it's very difficult to ascertain where is his location. Location of supplier of services, in case of multiple locations, again it's a challenging kind of provision. It's very difficult to ascertain. Banking and financial services, the borrower, say if it borrows from one bank and he has got two houses, one in Rajasthan, one in Maharashtra, then what will be the place of supply? They say the place of recipient. Now which is the place of recipient? Where he ordinarily resides. So say for example, if he resides 6 months over here, 6 months over there. So how do you really as a banker determine that where is his usual place of residence? So many bankers have started asking that you decide and tell me that where do you normally reside? Okay. Otherwise, like as a service provider, how can you determine that whether this is intrastate, interstate? So there are various difficult situations. Physical performance based services. As I discussed about this photography, there could be like n number of services where there could be a confusion that whether they will get fitted into performance based or recipient based or property based or event based. There could be n number of services. And in this case of dichotomy, in the previous service tax law, it was said that whichever is last, you go by that. Okay. You go in the succeeding order. Here in this case, nothing is provided. So whether to use some specific provision, this is general law, that you, general interpretation, that whichever is more specific to you, you go by that. But what if you find that all three are equally specific? And you find that तीनों मेरे को equally applicable है. So in such situations, again, like you don't have any recourse, you have to play with the risk. So you may say, finally, sir, risk क्या है? Say for example, something was considered to be an IGST transaction and I have paid CNS. What is the trouble? Is there any problem? टैक्स तो भर दिया ना, वो 9 करके 18 भरता था, ये एक 18 भर दिया. So the provision says that if you later on it's like identified that this was not payable, the other one was payable, so you can pay the correct one and claim refund of the incorrect one. Quite easy. And they further say no need to pay interest also. Interest bhi mat bharo. So you simply pay whatever was the correct tax and claim refund of the incorrect one. The problem is, will you get refund? Because when you go for refund, they say, please refer to section 54. And when you go to section 54, it says, any refund can be filed only within 2 years. Okay. And this normally audit department, government, they come like Hindi movie ka police. After 4 years, 5 years, when everything is over. Okay. And at that stage, you can't do anything. You can't reverse, rectify anything. So after 4 years down the line, they come for audit and they say, sir, ye to galat kiya aapne. Abhi now you please go for the correct one and please claim refund. And when you go to the refund counter, they will say, sorry boss, you are late. So this kind of like wrong interpretation can invite double payment. It was expected in this Amendment Act that at least they will take care of this provision, but unfortunately it has not come up. So you have to live with this risk, and therefore it's more essential that we need to know that what is the real place of supply. Okay. Intermediary services, it's not considered as export if like you are supporting some foreign supplier who with your help he is able to sell some goods in India. Your services are exported. His goods though may be imported, on which this local buyer would pay GST and custom duty. But your services are connected to the place of supply, which says the location of the supplier. Location of supplier is in India. So therefore, even though he is getting foreign currency, even though his service is getting consumed outside India, still he will be liable to pay GST. Will he be able to recover? That foreigner would say, what GST? Anyways, they are not paying even the like legitimate dues. If the dollar is like falling, I mean, if it goes up or rather falls down, if you are getting more rupees, still for that also they ask you to reduce or give discounts. Then how will they give you a GST of 18% of which they are not going to get credit? And if a foreign, another Chinese buyer, a Chinese intermediary agent, if he supplies his services, he won't be charged with the Chinese tax. Okay? And therefore he would be more competent as compared to you. So there could be some, even in respect of supply, goods supplied to India, his services won't be subjected to tax. So therefore there is a dichotomy. Some writ petition is being filed in Gujarat High Court. We are waiting for that judgment to come up. The OIDR, Online Information Data Access Services, okay. It's very, again, like it's as complicated as the online information data, etc. Whether the digital content, is it goods or service? Normally goods, right? We have got long back, ACC, Associated Cement Company, is saying that anything put on a media becomes goods. Or there are some other judgments which says TCS, etc. Goods can be even tangible, intangible, both incorporeal goods. We have been paying VAT since ages. So this kind of digital content, under this OIDR, they are saying it's a service. So therefore, even though you may presume this is goods, you have to see that this specific provision says this is service, and therefore you have to go by this place of supply provisions of services. Okay. So there were like these were the confusions which I wanted to like confuse you with. I think I have done my job. Now, if at all the organizers and time permits, we can take 1 or 2 questions. Otherwise, like I can say this. Thank you. Yeah, please.
Sir, this is related to immobile property. If there is a tenanted premises, like in Bombay, we have too many redevelopment where the tenanted premises are there. In that case, what is the implication of GST?
So, on what transaction?
Like hypothetically, if I am a tenant and I am selling my tenancy rights to the builder.
Okay.
Okay, in that case, what will be the implication?
Okay. So, first of all, the legal view, then the government view. So, legal view, I would say that first of all, this legal rights which are like of tenancy are being surrendered. Okay. And presume that you are getting some consideration for that. Okay, you are going to get some premium for that. Yeah, right. So first of all, one may consider that as like this is a service which is coming under the agreeing to do an act or tolerate an act, etc., where you are relinquishing, okay, for certain money. Otherwise, you would have continued. So then it is taxable. The second point, however, is that there is an exemption in relation to this residential premises car renting. Okay. So if something is connected to that, then one can take a stand that ultimately the renting of service is ultimately, when it is residential premise, it is exempt. Therefore, whatever I do, if I surrender or take, in both the cases, it should not be taxable.
So you mean to say in commercial premises also it won't be taxable?
Commercial premises, it's taxable.
It's taxable.
Yeah.
And what is the rate?
Rate would be 18%. Sir.
18%. Okay, thanks.
Welcome. Yeah, sir, please. Right. So there is a redevelopment project where like the agreement of redevelopment has been even signed before the GST, and now the actual activity happens after GST. The question is whether the service tax would be payable or GST would be payable. Again, first of all, I'll like presume that we are going by the conservative view and we presume that tax is payable and therefore the time of taxation. Okay. So in such a case, time of supply, in my humble opinion, would be the actually it is the pre-GST regime. Pre-GST regime. Okay. Ideally, it should have been paid. Okay. Now, say for example, service tax has not been paid, and somebody catches hold of you now that you are liable to pay service tax. Luckily, there are departmental circulars which says that in such a cases, exact wording of 4 of 2018. Like you pick up the circular of 2012 or 2016, both the circular reiterates the same thing. It will be payable at the time of conveyance deed or allotment letter. So to service tax authorities, you may say that it is payable under the GST. Okay. Somebody catches hold of you in GST, one can forget that circular and say that boss, ultimately you look at this time of supply. As per the time of supply, like I have already agreed for providing this services, already the consideration has come in the previous regime, and therefore I was liable in the service tax regime. So ideal scenario could be like you pay service tax which was little lesser or whatever, if the time lag is not too much. Okay. But if you're like forgotten, then this is the probably like solution. 4 of 2018. Yeah. Both. The developer as well as the land supplier, both.
So the TDR component?
Yeah, so they are trying to tax the TDR itself, the land
Yeah.
development rights, which if you go to Regner, it's equivalent to your land price. So effectively you are being taxed at the same price of land, if you compare it with your stamp duty rates. Okay. So it's almost similar.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Sir, my question is related to cross-charge invoicing. Suppose we have had office in Maharashtra, another unit in 10 other state. So you told us that whatever you charge, if the other unit is 100% eligible input credit,
Yeah.
then whatever you can charge.
Yeah.
Then can we invoice 1 rupee?
Yeah.
Invoice to other.
Anything will do. Anything will do. Anything will do.
So there is no penalty or interest after
No,
the
nothing.
Nothing,
As long as he is able to claim full credit, no problem at all. Last question, ma'am, you can ask. And then if at all some pending questions are there, we can take it up off session.
Sir, if I'm procuring marketing services from outside India, do I have to pay under reverse charge?
Yes, marketing services like marketing services for what?
Intermediary.
Intermediate. No, then you are not supposed to pay tax. Because place of supply would be outside India.
But there were recent advanced rulings which were saying that even if place of supply is outside India, you will have to pay under reverse charge.
Not like that.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so we can take up questions maybe of this session. Thank you.